happened since nations first appeared. There will be a time of distress, the Greek word thlipsis. I'm going to start throwing in more Greek words now, not to be learned, but let's show that we've done a little reading. The word parousia means the second coming. I use it all the time. The parousia, the second coming. One visible, single event in the future. The parousia, the arrival in power and glory of Jesus. Is that a small deal? I would have thought that was huge. So parousia. This word is thlipsis, means trouble, tribulation, distress, anguish, trials, difficulties of all sorts. There will be a time of distress, Jesus said, unlike any other from the nation's beginning, the time nations began. Nothing like it up to that time, and never will be again. A time of anguish greater than any since nations first came into existence. This is Jesus now. Oh, well, don't give me prophecy. I want Christian living. Wait a minute. I think we've gotten something wrong here. Yes, but Christian living is important. We have people in our congregation here who are shining examples of caretaking, of loving, all of that good stuff. That's certainly important. But what if the 22 chapters of Revelation are from Jesus? Oh no, we're going to argue about whether John wrote that, or was it which John or that John. That's terribly bad. The point is, what does it say to you from God through Jesus? Isn't that right? 22 chapters. It's all really a conglomeration of Old Testament prophecy. So if you don't know your Zephaniah and you don't know your Zechariah well, then you haven't got the mind of Jesus yet. We're learning. So you immerse yourself in the mind of Jesus, 22 chapters of Revelation, and Matthew 24, Mark 13, and Luke 21. Actually, 2 chapters of Matthew, Matthew 24 and 25. How important was this to Jesus? Then how important is it to you? Do you sound like Jesus? That's what we're working at today. The Great Tribulation. When is it? Is it all over? Is it today? Is it coming? That's not a small deal. You know, the greatest storm ever is happening. You've all been aware of it. Well, was it yesterday or last year? Or is it 5 years? I mean, doesn't matter. Of course it matters. So that's what we're talking about. The Great Tribulation. Thlipsis is the Greek word. Now, Jesus referred to this specifically, not only in Matthew 24, Mark 13, and Luke 21, somewhere else. Where did Jesus refer to the Great Tribulation? Other than Matthew 24, Mark 13, and Luke 21. The answer is, you all know it, because you're talking about this. Yeah, Revelation. In your marginal references, 7:14. Let's start there. Jesus was apparently very interested in this. And I'm then going to talk about things that Jesus didn't know. I'm going to tell you what Jesus didn't know. That's not popular with your friends in Trinitarian churches. They don't preach on that. We'll show you what Jesus didn't know and what he did know. And so when we get to Matthew 24, Mark 13, Luke 21, I'll go on repeating that. He says, you are to know this. And then he says, I don't know. Jesus didn't know. You don't know certain things. So what do you know and what don't you know? And that's what we're talking about today. So Revelation 7 and 14. Could somebody read that for us? What have we got there? Revelation 7:14. Easy to remember? 7 and twice 7.
One of the elders spoke to me and asked, who are these people dressed in white robes? Mm-hmm. Where have they come from? Mm-hmm. 14. I replied, my Lord, you know the answer. He replied to me, mm-hmm. These are the individuals who have passed through the Great Tribulation. They washed their robes, making them white yes. by the blood of the Lamb.
Isn't it something? At what stage of the story are you in Revelation here? The answer is between the 6th and the 7th seal. So what's happening is the 5th seal is said to be tribulation, suffering, 5th seal. Then there's an interval. Sorry, then the 6th seal is signs in the sky. Got it? This is parallel to Matthew 24. Guess what? Jesus repeated himself in the book of Revelation. The parallels are obvious between Matthew 24, Mark 13, Luke 21, and the book of Revelation. So the 5th seal, there are 7 seals, and then there are 7 trumpets, and there are 7 last plagues, or 7s. It takes a lot of work to get your mind around this. I'm amazed. You have to really read. What are you reading these days? I know it's awfully hard because we're busy, but you have to be really reading and studying these things. So anyway, it's between the 6th and 7th seal that this little episode comes. I get it, because the heavenly signs are threatening in seal 6. And then there's an interval where we seal 144,000 from all the tribes, plus a great crowd of people. Why? Because the wrath of God is about to start, you see? And they're not going to be subject of the wrath of God. So it's a sealing, setting them apart. Now look what your Jehovah's Witness friends at the door have done with this. They've applied this future event, which couldn't happen until the Great Tribulation has happened, right? It's after that that they're sealed from that, so it's in the future. They're saying, no, right now. The whole of their system is based on the 144,000 special ones and the also-rans at your door. How bad is that? Try to help them, right? That's a terrible model. Okay, so that's the Great Tribulation. It's the tribulation, the great one, right there. Yes, ma'am.
Can I just read in Revelation 7 where it talks
Please.
about that?
I would love it. Please do.
It's kind of interesting.
Exactly.
Because it says after this, and it's at the end of the six
Yes,
seals
it
and
is.
all
It
the
is.
earthquakes and all kind of stuff like
Exactly.
that. It says, I saw the 4 angels standing at the 4 corners of the earth, holding back the 4 winds of the earth, so that no wind would blow on the earth or on the sea. And I saw another angel ascending from the rising of the sun, having the seal of the living God. And as he cried out with a loud voice to the 4 angels, to whom it was granted to harm the earth and sea, saying, do not harm the earth or the sea or the trees until we have sealed the bondservants of our God on their foreheads.
Isn't that amazing?
Sealed, I have certified. I guess you must have
That's wonderful.
certified. And then they mentioned that it was 144,000.
Yes, from the tribes, presumably because it mentions all the tribes except for Dan and whatever that means exactly. But they're Jewish people who've come through the time of Great Tribulation, the great one. So Jesus, your Savior, your mentor, your rabbi, was deeply interested, and then we'll show you later that Paul was deeply interested in all of this stuff. It's amazing. It's only because we've engaged a friend of ours who has been writing on Zionism and then writing on the Second Coming and the Tribulation, and she engaged us in a very nice conversation for, 5, 6 weeks. I mean, 4 or 5 or 6 emails a day. That's the sort of intensity that I needed to get more clarity on this. It's been absolutely eye-opening, shatteringly so. So there it is, the Great Tribulation. Now, what is Jesus referring to? You know, when we say the something, we refer back to something we had before. For example, an angel came into the room in Luke 1, and then the angel said, you see how that works? We do it all the time. A dog came in, and the dog happened to be my dog. Very clear. So when Jesus says the Great Tribulation in Revelation 7:14, he's referring to something that they knew about. Well, where did they get that from? Obviously from Matthew 24. So let's go to Matthew 24. 3 chapters, Matthew 24, Mark 13, and Luke 21. Matthew 24. This has been a problem passage. Scholars love the word problem, by the way. If you read scholarly literature, a lot of it is problem. We don't know. It's difficult. It's complicated. You and I are naive enough to take Scripture as it is. We accept the chessboard for what it is, don't we? You can't play chess without a chessboard. You can't play soccer without a soccer field. You cannot talk about Bible or Jesus unless you've got a book to talk about. The faith once and for all delivered to the saints. Jesus' own brother said that. So in Matthew 24, here's the problem. I want you to be aware of what the problem is. You are spared reading all of the literature, which is mind-bogglingly complicated and perplexing. They came out of, let's say, they finished Jesus' ministry. We're talking about Wednesday of the week in which he was crucified here. Probably Wednesday, possibly Tuesday, more likely Wednesday evening. And Jesus has just finished giving a scathing excoriation of the Pharisees, has he not? Woe to you, 7 times? You brood of vipers, how can you escape being burned up? This is our gentle Jesus, right? That's in Matthew 23. And how does he end Matthew 23? The last statement there. Somebody read for me, if you would, the last verse of Matthew 23. Fascinating verse. What does it say?
For I say to you, from now on you will not see me until you say, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord.
Isn't that fascinating? I'll tell you, he says finally, having excoriated them, threatened them with all sorts of trouble, you will not see me again until you say. Blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord. That's from Psalm 118, a messianic psalm. There's coming a time when these people are going to say, oh my goodness, are we glad the Messiah's come? They're not doing that now, are they? How come then Jesus was able to look them in the eyes, these people standing in front of him in AD 30 or so, whenever the crucifixion was, whatever year, 30, 33, somewhere in there. And he says, you are going to see me again. But you won't see me until you finally say, praise God, the Messiah's come to save us. Was Jesus wrong? He said you. Well, in our Western way of speaking, we normally don't do that. But please stop being a Westerner. Don't read the book like an American or a Brit. Read it like a Hebrew. The you is corporate there. You and whoever your descendants are going to say that. So this is a major doctrine that the Abrahamic people recovered in the 1850s. They said, my goodness, yes, you can well say the church, the international church is the Israel of God. That's fine. We're the people of God. You're the true circumcision. You're not the Israel of the flesh, 1 Corinthians 10:18. Paul refers to natural Israel, should we call them ethnic Israel, as the Israel of the flesh, right? That's good. But you're the spiritual Israel. But that's not the whole story. Because in 3 long chapters, we haven't time to do it today, Romans 9 through 11, all of this you have to be familiar with, ready to go at the door with your friends or whatever. 9, 10, 11. Paul says, I am heartbroken about my fellow Israelites. He calls them Israelites. Isn't that good? You're not Israelites here. We can call you the Israel of God, Galatians 6:16. All those texts, fine. But you're not Israelites. Paul says, my heart is broken over my brothers and sisters, Israelites who don't believe in Messiah. He really cared. He's weeping over them. He said, I could give up my salvation. I don't think he meant quite literally, but it's a very dramatic way of saying, I wish I were cursed from God. It doesn't literally want to be cursed, but isn't that heartfelt though? So then he goes on to say, what's going to happen? Well, there are going to be Gentiles coming into the church, on and on and on, until a full quota. I don't know where we are yet. And then it says, that term later, all Israel is going to be saved. Doesn't mean every Israelite. Doesn't mean just because you're born a Jew, that makes you a good boy in God's sight. Doesn't, because Jesus said you're sons of the devil, didn't he? So, there will be a remnant, though, of Israelites who will come to faith through the Great Tribulation, a time of purification. So if you need to be tribulated, you're going to go through it. If you don't need to be tribulated, you're fine. Then you can escape. One of the churches, the Philadelphia church, you know this stuff from background. Because you've been faithful to the word, which is the gospel of the kingdom, you've been very faithful, I'm going to spare you from the Great Tribulation. Not by taking you to heaven, though, in a pre-tribulation rapture, which doesn't exist, but by escaping somehow. It's pretty clear, isn't it? The model out there is huge. You've got 10 million Jehovah's Witnesses who say that the parousia happened in 1914. It's all over. What? You've got preterists who say the second coming happened in 70 AD, finished. Which would mean the resurrection has come. Paul was very concerned about that. He named the individuals. We don't do it well today. He named Philetus and Hymenaeus. Said, these people are teaching the resurrection already happened. And it's a cancer. Are we worried about cancer? Right. Yeah, it's there for you. Wait a minute. I don't think we're sufficiently perturbed by the words of Paul. That's a cancer. It's going to kill you. So if you've got friends at the door saying the second coming happened in...
It's going to spread.
1940. That's what?
Cancer spreads.
Yes.
Cancer spreads. We have Unitarian friends who say that the second coming, much of it, not entirely the whole thing, but friends in the Unitarian field who say the Great Tribulation is essentially AD 70. Keep that in mind. How are you going to correct that? What are you going to say to that? Now, they're not saying the second coming has happened, but they're saying that all of that stuff about Great Tribulation in Jerusalem, it's all over. You know, if you don't like the future, what do? You put the future behind you. Now, these are doctrinal things we don't care about. We better care about it. If you care about Jesus, he did. If you care about Paul, he's certainly worried about this a lot. Because cancer in your belief system is not good for you. Some of us were Sabbath keepers way back, right? We were. That was killing us. I wish you could have seen me in 1965. I was dead. I was out of it. My dad had to come and pick up the pieces. I'm doing much better now. But then I've changed a lot of my thinking. So anyway, back to the point. The Great Tribulation is the worst time in history. That's what Jesus said. And you all know, of course, what verse is he quoting there? Because Jesus loved the book of Daniel. And when somebody in the Unitarian circle known to us said, the prophecies of Daniel are horribly wrong when you get to chapter 11 at the end, the community strongly objected to that. It's an awful thing to say. If the prophecies of Daniel are wrong, Daniel's a false prophet, and Jesus was horribly mistaken. You see the effect of that? So you don't want to go around saying the prophecies of Daniel in chapter 11 towards the end are wrong, are horribly wrong. Don't go there. I saw what happened when somebody did that. Terribly painful. Okay, so what about the Great Tribulation? When is it? How does it work? In Matthew 24, they come out of the temple. This is where we're just resuming our point about you will not see me until you say, praise God, the Messiah is coming to rescue us from this terrible time of tribulation we've just gone through. A remnant is going to survive. And in Matthew 24, that's the question that follows on the part of Jesus' students. Let's call them students. He's the rabbi. I have to add this. If the devil has one trick, it's to separate Jesus from his teachings. Oh, I believe in Jesus. I accept Jesus. What does that mean? Why isn't the phrase gospel of the kingdom mentioned? Because the teaching of Jesus is what people get rid of. Oh, I love Jesus, died for me and rose. That's wonderful. I believe all that. Yes, but you haven't got the teaching of Jesus yet until you say, I embrace all of the stuff we're doing today. So in Matthew 24, isn't this wonderful? The question. Jesus came out from the temple, having excoriated the leaders there, and was going away. When his students came, this is Matthew 24:1, they came up to point out the temple buildings. Tom, our good friend here, is an expert on the geography of this much more than I am. Apparently those buildings, Josephus, the historian of Judaism, the Jewish historian, says this was a spectacular, one of the wonders of the world, isn't it? The sun shining on those incredible buildings. Some of those stones were, 15 yards big or something. I mean, it's just amazing construction. And they come out and they say, look at this incredible thing, Jesus. Isn't this amazing? And he then said, in verse 2, don't you see all these things? Let me tell you. Amen, I'm telling you. I wish I could have recorded Jesus' voice. How did he say that? You know, let me tell you, folks. Did he yell? Did he raise his voice? He did sometimes. Not all the time. Okay, there will not be one stone left upon another which will not be torn down. Isn't that amazing? Yes, Tom.
That brings up the question of the Wailing Wall.
It does, doesn't it?
Was that part of the temple?
Apparently.
They think it was.
They do.
It was a retaining wall,
Yes.
wasn't it?
But if it was part of the temple, it should have been...
It should have.
No stone upon another.
Exactly. Now, it's a great point. I hope everybody got that. The Wailing Wall today, where you see them putting their prayers, in between the stones, that was part... If there is an argument, I'm not going to get into because this is not my field. Archaeology and history, I'm not good in that area. But it brings up an argument as to exactly where the temple was. Some say it wasn't there. Some say, let's suppose it's correct, that Wailing Wall is still standing. So strictly speaking, not every stone was torn down. And how did the Romans...
I believe that that's not really the temple.
You think?
I'd rather believe that not one stone is left standing.
Yeah.
And that they kind of have that wrong.
That could be. That may be.
That's what I'd rather believe.
Yeah, maybe.
I'd rather believe Jesus. There's not
But
one.
I mean, it's one or the other.
Yeah.
Yeah, or he wasn't referring to.
Or he might have
Temple.
had a different temple in mind as well.
Well,
And
That's,
also he didn't know which temple.
and he didn't know. It's a possibility. That's what I'm going to drive at today. He himself says, you don't know, he said, and I don't know. Only the Father knows when this horrible end of the age, this wonderful end of the age, good and bad, we don't know what's going to happen. All he knows is from Daniel that temple is going to be in trouble just prior to the second coming. He knows that. I don't think he knew. It could be 1,000 temples built there, theoretically. That's possible. Anyway, we'll leave that as an open question for archaeologists to decide. There is a Wailing Wall. Possibly there are stones there of that original temple. Perhaps that's not the right place. All of that is open.
So that begs the question that it's funny that they call him a false prophet because he was smart enough not to set dates. Yeah, he's a false prophet to
Yes.
many, well, Jews obviously.
He didn't set any dates.
But I don't.
This has been fascinating
false
But
because
just
as
because
we,
he mentions,
yeah,
I mean, Daniel mentions there's a temple, and Jesus
Certain.
talks about this temple,
yes,
but maybe Jesus didn't know whether it was that temple or not.
Well, we know he didn't know because he said he didn't know. My point is that the Jews especially call him a false prophet.
Oh, yes.
He's a false
Yes.
messiah, a false prophet. But he didn't really make himself a false prophet.
well, obviously not.
He didn't say like to nowadays where people go, oh yeah, it's September, whatever. And then they take it back and no one holds them to account, by the way.
That's right. We've had tons of that. So whatever that is with the stones, but that's actually the major point I'm driving at, is that Jesus himself didn't know when all of these signs would start. Let's look at the question they ask in Matthew 24:3. He was sitting on the Mount of Olives, that's just east of the temple. He got it across the Kidron Valley, the Mount of Olives, and they're looking west at this fantastic building in the set of buildings in the sunset, so let's suppose, on a Wednesday. And 2 days later, they're going to put him on a cross. Isn't that something? How bad is that? You start crucifying Jesus. That's painful, awful, in a minimal sense. Okay, tell us, they said. 4 of them, it says, 4 of these disciples, not all 12, but 4 of us. When will these things happen? And what will be the sign of your parousia? I'm going to get you used to that word. Your arrival, your parousia, and the end of the age. For little specialists in language, not even the end of the age, but end of the age. You're coming and end of the age. You're coming and it's one thing. He doesn't repeat the article there. What will be the sign of your parousia and end of the age? It's one thing. So you get that fact under your belt and stick with that, right? What you do with your friends then is show them the 5 occurrences of the end of the age in Matthew. There are 5 of them. We won't go through them all. But the Great Commission says, I will be with you, the end of Matthew, until the end of the age, the end of the age. That's a fixed datum. It's like the end of September. It's not in question. So, what will be the sign? What's the indication of your impending parousia and end of the age? That's the question. Many commentators have pointed out, they assume the falling of the temple and the end of the age, same thing. I think that's right. I don't think they were wrong. They knew this from Daniel. Because clearly in Daniel there was trouble in the temple, followed by the great event. Tell me, what is the great event that's going to happen at the parousia? What is for you the stupendous event in human history? Which is the same event as the parousia. What would that be?
The resurrection.
Of course. Tom said correctly there, the resurrection. Is that a big deal? I would think you're going to get immortality.
Yeah.
Sounds like a big deal to me.
Sounds like a huge deal to me. So all this going to heaven when you die stuff waters all that down. It's very clever. All your friends who tend to go to church where they say, so-and-so's gone, looking down, gone to heaven, that is killing the parousia doctrine in a very clever way. Why would you look forward to the coming parousia if all your friends have made it to glory in heaven? It's a clever lie, but it's a lie. That's cancer now. Oh no, they're just good people. Yes, I get that. We were good people, but we were ignorant. Now you think of Hosea, my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. Oh no, it's just too bad. They're great people, they're wonderful people. Wait a minute. I don't think we're doing that quite well. Does it mean we should condemn everybody? Of course not. But we should try to help them. So, this is not going to happen today, but the kingdom coming, and it's the resurrection. Okay, what verse will give you that riveting effect of the resurrection and the parousia? What verse is that? 1 Corinthians 15:23? Many. 1 Corinthians 15:23, I'll ask somebody to read that. 1 Corinthians 15:23. Paul is describing the order of the resurrection here. And what does it say in 15:23, 1 Corinthians? Something really good.
But each in his own order,
Yes.
Messiah, the first fruits, then those who belong to Messiah will be resurrected at Jesus' future second coming.
Got it.
That's a paraphrase.
That's one. Any version, doesn't matter what translation you're using, all got that right. So he's rehearsing, Paul is, the order of events. Christ is the first fruits. That's a harvest thing, isn't it? First fruits, I get that. He's the only one who's been immortalized so far. I get that. Then, after that, doesn't say the next minute, doesn't say immediately after. It says next stage. Important Greek distinction there, not immediately after. But the next stage is those who belong to Christ, that would be the faithful, the true people, will be resurrected at his parousia. Enti parousia aftu. Throwing out some of these Greek words because we'll have people, watching, and Greek speakers like it when I give them their language and their pronunciation. Yes.
In English, in the translations, what do some others have in verse 24? I got after this. What do you got?
Yes.
Then comes the end.
Then comes the end. After this comes
Yes.
the end. How is that different from the point we make about Matthew 24:29? Immediately after this event?
Well, immediately after is without any intervening events.
So how is this? I mean, after this or then comes the end sounds like, one after the other, like Matthew 24:29. How is that different?
It's quite different in English,
In
actually.
English it's
yes.
different?
Immediately after the service, we're going into Fayetteville. At some
After
later
the
stage,
service,
we
we're
will.
going to the
No, after doesn't mean immediately after, necessarily.
in English.
No.
I'm not.
Right.
I'm a second language. I'm just.
That's right.
To me, it sounds like.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good way of putting it.
Yes.
So when you say we're going to church, then we're going.
Yes.
Right.
Not immediately.
So we're going to church immediately.
Yeah.
We're going.
Makes a
So-
huge difference in English. Immediately after means there's no intervening event. And when you discuss this on email with believers,
That's why we have the word immediately.
yes,
Okay.
immediately
It
means
defines
without
when the
mediation,
then is.
non-mediate,
Yes.
no mediation, no middle between two events, immediately after. This is the verse that has caused all the problems. If you examine the commentators, in Matthew 24:29, Jesus said, immediately after.
So it didn't mean after or then.
No.
There.
No.
It means immediate.
Where
Whereas-
did you say it mentions immediately?
Okay, let's focus on that verse. This is the
That was
critical verse.
24.
Matthew 24 and verse 29, and let's have the parallel in Mark. What would that be? Mark 13 and 24.
13, 9.
I'm going to ask somebody to read both these. Matthew 24:29 has immediately after the tribulation of his days. 24:29?
Yep, but immediately following those days of the Great Tribulation,
Got it.
the sun will be darkened and so on.
Is that AD 70?
The moon will
I doubt that. Is this AD 70?
And then Mark 13:24.
Good.
At that time, after that tribulation, the sun will become dark, the moon will not shine.
And they'll see the Son of Man coming. You'd think that would be clear, wouldn't you?
This one
Now-
says in those days.
Yes.
But in those days, after that tribulation,
It's even clearer. It's better.
the sun will be dark.
It's quite literal. It's almost as though the Bible anticipates the nonsense we're going to make out of this, right? Wait a minute. In those days, after that tribulation. That was for my southern friends here. Is it clear? Let's argue about, let's not. But the commentaries are full of brain-breaking arguments here. I wrote to some good friend of mine, I said I was writing on the subject, what was his view? And I said, what about Matthew 24:29? Immediately after. What does immediately mean? Well, he said, depends what you mean by immediately. Do you mean 1 second after? He did, because when the brain doesn't want to accept a new piece of truth, it's going to fight, even if you're a Unitarian. It doesn't like change. Yes.
Just before the,
Yes,
I'll
go
talk about Michelle.
Mhm.
Milk no sugar. Don't we become date setters from the middle of the 70th week once the Antichrist has shown?
It's a great question. I think we do. I do think so. Yes, because that 70th week, I think we can show it its future. There will be a point in time, if you've measured the beginning of the 7-year period, you will know.
Right.
That's right. We do become date setters, but at the moment we don't.
So he's
I think
referring
he's
to
right.
once the Great Tribulation begins, then
Yes,
we.
I think we
pretty
do.
much know.
I think we're forced into that by the logic of everything else. Any other solution to that would just be chaos. So I think he's got a great point.
Then we can give people specifics.
Yeah.
Folks, we got 3 years.
But right now, we don't know. So this is our whole point. I don't know when the second coming is. I do think that once we get to the last week, And people hate that last week. They say, how could God sort of separate a whole week? It should end in 33 AD. If you take the first 69 weeks up to the appearance of Messiah, it should end in about 33 AD. That's what they say. When you go to the book of Acts, there's nothing in there that's an end of anything. That's another story.
The reason Milk is bringing up date setting is because there's a conversation online
Okay.
started by me that Newton was a date setter.
Yes.
Someone was talking about Newton, and he had 2060, I think.
Yeah. 2016?
60.
Okay.
Is it over?
2060.
Well,
He's still on,
I saw
on
that.
track.
I saw a show about that on
yeah.
History Channel or something.
He's still on track.
I would love to know how they calculate that.
Well, you have to watch the show. He has a channel. Apparently, Omar says he has a YouTube channel, and he gives the link here,
Yeah,
where it's all about Newton and his.
yeah. Newton's date setting was based on his intricate and
Mind-bogglingly difficult stuff.
mind-boggling,
Yes.
decade-long study
Mathematical
of the temple and the universe and all this stuff. So I mean, he was a great brain. So I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay, my reflection on
And
Newton.
actually, he measured. He
Yes.
figured out in the Old Testament all the measurements
Yeah.
of the temple and everything to where
Oh,
when it's
crazy.
when it comes down from heaven,
Mhm.
it'll be able to be built. I guess
Yeah,
that way or
he
something.
found.
It's
he-
fascinating.
He said
is
he
special.
found the secret to everything in the
Yes.
dimensions God gives
Yes.
of the temple, and that had to do with the universe. And we know Newton, how good he
Yeah,
was
mathematics,
with astronomy and
physics.
physics. So,
Since we're talking about Newton, let me give you an insight on Newton. Newton, brilliant guy. Not very good in Hebrew. Can you bear it?
no.
Not a specialist in Hebrew. He made an elementary mistake. Since we got onto this, I didn't intend to go here, but go back to Daniel 11 a moment, and I'll show you what the issue here is. Daniel 11.
45.
Before that, Daniel 11 is apparently a lot of it good history. If you look at Daniel 11, this is the last vision given to Daniel, and the early part of Daniel 11 is a story of the king of the north and the king of the south, right? Most of that is history. The difficulty for everybody, now this is a difficulty, the difficulty of everybody has been, where do you stop history and where do you start the future? You get it? If you're a liberal theologian and don't like the Bible, then you say the whole thing is history. The whole thing is history. Then, when you get to chapter 12, remember no chapter breaks, what do you find in chapter 12:1? The Great Tribulation. 12:1, the Great Tribulation. Okay, so then that's all past as well. What do you find in chapter 12:2? Many of those who are sleeping in the dust of the ground will awake, some to the life of the age. All the rabbis knew what that meant, the life of the age to come. Eternal life is a fog translation, right? Designed to put you into a state of confusion and way. The life of the age to come. That is your destiny, isn't it? This is the moment in which you are going to become immortal, excuse me? Well, who cares? I do. Yes.
But in Daniel 2, the
Yes.
next phrase,
Yes.
the last phrase, it says,
Yeah.
but the others to disgrace and everlasting contempt.
Yes, right.
Now that's not, to us, that's the second resurrection,
right.
which is not at the same time
No,
as the first
it's not.
resurrection at all.
No,
There's a whole bunch
Exactly.
of stuff that happens in that comma
that's right.
between the first
It,
people
it isn't
raising
in,
and then the
it's
second people.
exactly right. It's not clear till you get to Revelation 20 that there's 1,000 years between the two resurrections.
Yeah.
There it's clear.
Well, that's what Jesus himself said too.
Yes and unjust.
Yeah,
Just.
Jesus also talked about the resurrection of both at the same time, presumably, but obviously, as Anthony said,
not
later
clear.
on we get revelation
No,
about
not at the same time. That he discusses that they will be resurrected.
Yes.
Yeah,
That
so
the good
some
and
to
the bad,
everlasting
Yes.
life,
Everybody
some to
that live
condemnation.
will be resurrected.
Yes.
Jesus.
But he doesn't say it's at the same time.
No, he says some to everlasting life and some to condemnation.
But we have
So,
come to understand by reading it all, figuring out that it is not at the same time.
That's
right.
right.
All I'm saying is that sounds very much like that 12:2, what Jesus says as well.
It certainly does. Now, for your historical interest, the rabbis themselves said of Daniel 12, verse 2, it means the righteous get raised here, some to life everlasting, others who get resurrected later. They had sort of sensed a difference. It's not clear. entirely. But the rabbis believed in 2 resurrections. Only when you get to Revelation 20 do you get it quite specifically. So Revelation 20 is quite clear.
Yeah, Enoch, the book of Enoch,
Mhm.
has 2 resurrections.
It does.
By the way. So
Separated
there
about
was
400 years.
Some
Question
understanding.
about
Yes.
Since we're back on the resurrection,
Yes.
I had a question.
Mhm.
Back in 1 Corinthians 15, where it talks about here, for as in Adam, verse 22, is in Adam all die, so also Christ, also in Christ shall be made alive.
Oh, yes.
Okay,
Mhm.
so people died during a different time period.
Yes.
Okay, then the next verse says, but each in his own order.
Mhm.
Now, does that hint at the first and second resurrection?
Yes, I think it certainly does. At least hinted at, yes.
I mean, it doesn't say it,
Yeah.
but
In order.
order means after.
It's a battle order. These are military terms. The general is out front, then the super
So
officers here.
some are resurrected, but all die.
Right.
But all die at different
That's a good point. I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah,
All people,
all die
they die at different
but then-
stages.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the
Just
first.
and unjust,
Yes.
but it doesn't say at the same time.
No.
It's,
Yeah.
that's the hard part about some of this stuff.
Yeah.
Well,
It's
if
making it, separating it.
it's hard if you don't believe Revelation 20.
Yeah, well,
It's
that's
very
right,
easy.
right. But you don't know that when you start out.
That's
Yeah,
right.
but-
It comes along.
Yeah, the first fruits of the harvest,
Yeah.
as you want to talk about the first fruits, is
Yeah.
not the whole harvest. All the-
First fruits are the first crops to
Yeah,
get.
Right.
the very first
Right.
Yeah.
Are they?
fruit.
And
Yes.
you have others later in the
Yes.
next season. So
We
It's
have
not
the
the
first
every
one,
apple
first
on the
fruit.
tree, it's the
First is
first.
first fruit.
Right.
Yeah.
Through Christ.
Yes, Christ is the first of the first fruits. We are the rest of the first fruits. But you're right. You cannot absolutely establish the 2 resurrections until you get to Revelation 20. The nearest you get to it would be Luke 14:14, where Jesus said, "You will be rewarded at the resurrection of the just," which you could say certainly allows for a resurrection of unjust. Otherwise, though, Paul will talk about, we know there's going to be a resurrection of just and unjust. Not clear. If you just read the rest of what you started to read there for us in 1 Corinthians 15, please.
Let's see. Okay.
Yeah.
23.
Yes.
But each in his own order.
Uh-huh.
Christ the first fruit.
Yes.
After those
Yes.
who are Christ at his coming.
Then, read on.
And then comes the end.
Yes.
When he delivers the kingdom to God.
Okay, that would be at the end of the millennium
End
for
of
us.
the
Then
age
comes the
is
end.
millennium,
Yes.
not the end of everything.
No.
But
The next stage. So the first stage is Jesus. Not immediately after, but at a later stage come the faithful. At the parousia. This is your absolutely riveting, unassailable verse, right? Parousia and resurrection are the same event. Then comes the end. In this context, he's probably talking about the final end of the resurrection system, right? Then comes the end of the resurrection, which we now know is the second resurrection, and that's based on Revelation 20.
20 verse 5.
Yep, 21st.
Rest of the dead.
Right.
Not the ones he just talked about,
Right,
except
right.
for the righteous ones.
Exactly.
But the rest of the dead
Rest.
did not come to life until the 1,000 years were completed. And that's
Is
a
it clear?
parenthetical phrase.
Yes.
Because that right after that it says this is the first
Yes.
resurrection.
Obviously.
And that's very confusing if people don't realize he's.
question answered from Randy.
Yeah,
From
I'm just gonna
Randy.
read some of
Yes.
these now, you
What's
know,
Randy got to
questions.
say? Great.
I've heard that some group talks about a pre-wrath rapture,
Yes.
where the church is caught up before the end of the last 3.5 years.
Yes.
Can you comment on
Well, yes. The wrath of God is really executed by Jesus as he comes. It's the wrath of the Lamb. So, obviously, Jesus is not going to pour his wrath on his bride. Is that clear?
How's it different?
The church is not going to have the wrath of God poured in. That's absurd. Jesus is not going to pour the wrath on his bride. So, at the moment in which Jesus appears in the sky, that's when we get immortalized.
How's that different from the pre-trib thing?
Oh, vastly different. Pre-trib is 7 years earlier.
But they're raptured before the whole 7 years.
Yes, absolutely.
And this, so you go through the good period and then you get raptured.
So pre-wrath gets much closer to the truth, because it's just before Jesus pours out the wrath of God on the world, he has immortalized the saints.
No.
This became
It's just
amazing.
before the second coming. It's
Just
not
before
at the
second.
3.5 year point.
No.
That would.
So
There are
it's-
people who believe that too.
Well, Randy wrote
Mid-trib.
Mhm.
Randy wrote that the church is caught up
Yeah.
before the end of the last. Oh, I see. So before the second coming, basically. So you do go through the Great Tribulation.
Yes.
But we do believe that we get caught up. Right?
Okay, if we, it's interesting how much stuff there is here. You've got three
We're going to
views.
be raptured at different times, though.
At the
Is that what-
No.
Two groups, the 7-year group and the 3.5-year group.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Let's get the
Why are we-
terminology. You've got a
Why are
pre-tribulation
we
rapture.
all have the same
You've got a
time?
mid. Some people believe in a mid-tribulation rapture, and others believe in a post-tribulation, as we do, the post-tribulational rapture, which is roughly the same as the wrath of God time. But Jesus appears in the sky, immortalizes you, and as he comes, he pours out the wrath of God on the world.
So Anthony, when Jesus shows up, that's basically the end of the last week.
Yes, of course.
Or the
Yes.
last seventh of the
Yes,
seventh.
of course.
Okay. So
Exactly.
where we differ with this pre-wrath rapture is that they go a bit before.
Well, if you call it the mid-tribulation rapture, then they're halfway. If you call it the pre-wrath rapture, we're rather much the same. Not a huge difference. However, here's the trick. They keep talking about the pre-tribulation rapture. They should talk about the pre-tribulation rapture resurrection. You got it? The
Because
rapture
isn't a thing.
always,
We should be using the word resurrection.
of course,
And,
catching up.
I mean, those that are alive won't have died. They will,
Yeah.
Right.
They'll
they
be
will be
changed.
raptured.
You got
or at
it.
least we'll put it that
You
way.
got it.
But those that believe that,
Yeah.
though,
Yeah.
the hideous part about that, is they believe that they don't even need to care about the whole rest of the Bible.
No.
They don't care about the tribulation and the man of sin. They don't care about any
No,
of
of
that
course.
because
Good point.
they're already going to be raptured.
That's right.
That's a big thing.
So you're saying we should call it at the resurrection, not at the
Yes.
rapture?
No, I don't
or
like
at
the word
Cutting.
rapture
Well,
personally, just because
It's a
of the
great point.
connotation.
What they've done is it's very clever. They've stolen the word rapture. They've created a noun. There's no noun rapture.
Yes, yeah.
There is a verb.
It's a verb.
To be caught up, that's in 1 Thessalonians 4. We're going to be caught up to meet the king, to escort him in the direction which he's going, which is the earth, right? That's the rapture. You haven't got a noun in the Bible, you've got a catching up. That's fine. However, what they've done is to say, we believe in a pre-tribulation rapture, a resurrection. They forget it's the resurrection. They actually are believing that all the faithful, Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, will be in that pre-tribulation rapture resurrection. That's what they believe. That's not a small event, is it?
Somebody online
Yeah.
here, not Lucas, I've not seen you before.
Mm.
We go through the 3.5 years of tribulation. Then Jesus comes and we are caught up to our Lord.
Well,
At the end of 3.5
no,
years.
that's mid-tribulationism. That's wrong. No, at the end of the tribulation, Jesus said immediately after the tribulation, that's at the end of the 7 years, the Son of God appears, and that's when the resurrection rapture happens. You see the chaos here, even in our little discussion? It's amazing. Yes.
You want to go back to Daniel 11? You were going to make a
Yes, Daniel 11.
About Newton.
About Newton. I was, thank you. Daniel
Sorry,
11.
Before you get
There's
to that.
several
Yes.
things online here, but I don't
Yeah.
know if you want to go to
No.
all of them.
Yeah, sorry folks, we're trying to keep up. And before you go to Daniel 11, this has to do with Daniel 11.
Yes.
So, yeah, so there's this debate, right, about where does
Yeah.
history stop and mid-chapter
Yes.
or whatever. Why isn't the whole deal still future? Why isn't the whole
Well, some have said that, and that's possible, in which case the second coming would be a long way ahead of us, if in fact it's all prophecy from verse 5.
Right, because everyone
Some of them.
assumes that
Yeah.
the kingdoms there are the Alexander, the
Yes.
Persian, whatever, but I'm saying
It's possible.
it's easier to look at that.
It's possible. Then you've got a whole lot of king of the north, king of the south, years of that before you even get to the last king.
Anyway,
That's-
sorry, make your meet.
Okay, I'll make my Newton point here. Not discounting the brilliance of Newton, who was an Arian, by the way. He believed in a pre-existing Christ. He was a non-Trinitarian, flat out.
Amen.
Amen. On that. Okay, so 1131 says, forces from him, let me read back to 30, for ships of Kittim, that would be the west, like Cyprus, the west, even the west, like England, whatever. Ships from the west, Kittim would be the west. Ships from the west will do what? They will come against him, the king of the north, and he will be disheartened, return and become enraged. That sounds like a beast to me. Enraged against the Holy Covenant and take action, and he will come and show regard for those who forsake the covenant. That's interesting. There are people who are shaky on the covenant with God. And so this king of the north is operating in cahoots with them. Then 31, here's the key verse in terms of Newton. Forces from him, this king of the north, will arise, desecrate the sanctuary fortress, do away with the regular sacrifice, and they are going to set up the abomination of desolation. Jesus had something to say about that, didn't he? He makes that the key sign, right? When you see the abomination of desolation. So if Jesus is citing this verse, at least this verse is future. That much we could say. How much before that is still future remains an open question. I think probably not all of it, but let's leave that discussion out of it. Here's my point about Newton. Newton lived in a time where Rome was the bad guy. We tend to say the bad guy, whoever he is, would be the Korean, would be the Antichrist right now. Right? That's contemporary news. So Rome, for Newton, was the bad guy. Problem was that the king of the north is not Rome. That would be the king of the west. King of the north would be a Middle Eastern thing, Assyria and so on, right? But not the king of the west. No problem, Newton got round that one. Instead of translating this as forces from him, the king of the north, he translated forces after him. In other words, forget the king of the north and move to Rome. Got it? And many commentators point out it's just wrong.
By Rome, you mean the Catholic Church?
I mean the Roman Empire in its revived form, including the Catholic Pope.
18th century?
Yeah.
18th century England, he lived in, right?
Yes, of course. It would be the whole Roman Empire. Yeah. So he twisted the text there. Quite a lesson for a man as brainy as he was. It doesn't say forces after him. It says forces coming from him, the king of the north, right? So the subject has not changed, the king of the north. Okay, so that is an interesting point. We don't know where to start the prophecy and where to end the history. My sense is that we at least must begin in 21, which is the final bad guy. Because Jesus does that at least. Whether Jesus also spoke of the earlier kings of south, king of the north, as part of the process, it's not clear. It's funny the book of Revelation doesn't seem to deal with any of that. So my sense at the moment is that we should begin with the last king of the north. He's the bad guy. How do I know that? Because Paul quotes the man who exalts himself above every god. He's quoting out of Daniel 11. So at least that last one is the abomination of desolation. It's future to us. Wow, there's a lot to this. I've forgotten.
Yeah, and there's comments, but I think you're never going to make it.
We're not going to make it.
Lesson if I read you everything.
Okay, no.
So
Well,
apologies to everyone of mine for not.
Well, only if there are any questions.
No, I think we pretty much.
Okay.
Some people's brains are hurting from all
My mind.
That's interesting.
Especially, Ingrid says, especially those who this is not, English is not her mother tongue.
Oh.
Some people are having a hard time with all this.
So Ingrid, we're so thrilled you're there. Your English is amazing. Let's see if we can keep this very simple then. We're back in Matthew 24. They come out, they look at the buildings, and they say, what is going to be the sign of your parousia and end of the age? That's not 70 AD. Parousia means resurrection, right? We did that, 1 Corinthians 15:23. We've riveted together those two ideas. The second coming is the same as the resurrection of the dead. Is that an insignificant thing? No, that's the point at which you, listening to us this morning, are going to gain immortality. What? That's amazing. This is the moment of history for us.
I will read one question
Yes,
from
please.
Terry M.
Yes.
Is it so bad to know the approximate date of Jesus' return if we're measuring from the middle of the last seven? Simeon knew by the Holy Spirit
Good
that
point.
he would see the Christ before he died.
I love that. That's a good point.
Good point.
Good point. And I think that our friend No Sugar, no Cyanide rather. No sugar, no cyanide.
Milk.
He's right. You do become a date setter at the beginning of the 7 years. That's right. You can't avoid that. But that's a good point too. We don't know though when these events are going to start. So here's our major point in Matthew 24. Does Jesus answer that question? What will be the sign of your parousia and end of the age? Of course he does. He could have said, there are no signs, forget it, I can come back tomorrow. Don't say that. He gives a very long sermon that we are supposed to take in. But the devil keeps saying, oh no, you don't need that stuff. Wait a minute, this is the mind of Christ now. I think Jesus was fascinated by this stuff, so we should be too.
Can I just say, by date setters, we mean it gives us an approximate period of time, but obviously the day or the hour doesn't give us. So when we're in the middle of that last 7 years,
Sure.
you know, we get years, but we don't know the day, the exact day or the hour.
Whether it's 10 to 3 or quarter to 3, we don't know that. That's exactly right.
But what they're doing nowadays is that giving you a date and almost an hour. And
you're aware of Armstrong's in 1975. I was terrified when that booklet came out in 1975. Herbert W. Armstrong said the Great Tribulation is going to begin in 72 or 75. Was it 75?
Both. It was 72 and then it was 70.
Okay, thank you. We have our experts here who know this. They lived through it. Then we had
It was
Wisen.
69 because I remember for sure wondering if I was going to make it up to 1969.
And then 72 and then 75.
Paul was dead against that. He said, don't let anybody deceive you, trouble you in any way about date setting. And that's exactly what Herbert did. I was petrified. Went back to Oxford that year. Thought, my goodness, the Great Tribulation is going to begin this year. That was a crime on the part of Herbert. He should never do that. Okay, since that time, I'm Wisenan, right? 1988. 88 reasons why Christ had come back in 1988. He wrote books. Millions of dollars. Failed. Oh, whoops, I got it wrong by 1 year. You see how crooked people are?
The Mayans.
Horrible.
2012.
The Mayan calendar.
2012, I think it
Then
was.
the blood moon.
The blood moons and the eclipse of the sun. What does that mean? Actually, what that means is that God is reminding us that there is a virgin. If you want to do the constellations, it doesn't tell you anything about how far the second coming is. So that's completely not it. So you can look at the moon and think that's wonderful. It is like Revelation 12. I see that, but so what? It's going to
Why is
happen.
every prophecy teacher, I mean, I've listened to a lot of them, they all set dates.
They do.
You know, it's so obvious in what does that make you after you say it 2 or 3 times? You keep changing it, you know.
Well, should make it.
I mean,
What is the penalty for false prophet?
that's what I'm saying.
Execution by death. It seems to me, you see, God is a little bit tougher than we are here. He's a bit tougher than we are. If you make a false prophecy, you're dead. Chop his head off. If you commit adultery, stone him to death. Bring my enemies in front of me and kill them, the ones who didn't want the kingdom to be. I mean, this is tough stuff, isn't it? It's very hard to get the right balance. Anyway, my point to you was simply that the date setting has got to be wrong. Now, my major point was this. When you talk about the rapture, they do it all the time. Jeremiah's, the rapture, they mean a pre-Great Tribulation resurrection rapture, right? They forget the resurrection quickly, but that's what they actually mean. They think that Abraham and Isaac and Jacob are not going to be in that resurrection. They think that's later. But they think that all the faithful of all the ages are going to be resurrected 7 years earlier than the return of Christ. That's the pre-tribulation rapture resurrection. But they dropped the word resurrection. Don't want you to hear that. I wrote to them years ago. I said, you're saying the 7th trumpet is different from the last trumpet? Yes. That's what they taught at Dallas Theological Seminary for years. You couldn't be on the staff unless you believed that. I've talked to these people. 7th trumpet's different from the last trumpet? Difficult. No, it's the same last trumpet. Okay, you see the mass confusion here? The devil deliberately wants us confused. So back to our major point is, what you believe is affecting your brain and your health. You need the sound, health-giving words of Jesus. You're going to feel better. The more confusion up here, the worse your health. It's destroying you. So don't believe what's false, believe what's true. So we're back to 2 Thessalonians 2:10. If you don't have a passion for truth, you're not going to be saved. Ooh, that's tough. Because a passion for truth they would not receive in order to be saved. God said, all right, I'll show you what it's like to be confused. And look at where we are. We're confused. Okay, so rapture, resurrection, rapture. Moving on.
Yes.
Got it so far? Good.
I think we're good enough. Yes.
Good enough.
Let's get past verse 1.
Let's see.
Well, we did. We got to verse 20.
All right, we skipped ahead to 29, but let's do the rest of this because it's beautiful stuff. Matthew 24 and trouble in the temple. What will be the sign of your coming? The other versions don't say anything about what will be the sign of your coming. They simply say what will be the sign when all these things are going to happen. I think it's all the same. I think they all understood the same point. What's the time when you're going to come back? We want to know about that. As it turns out, I'll suggest this to you, as it turns out, 70 AD wasn't it. Actually, it's rather dismal. You, believing in the truth, believe in the restoration of everything, don't you? At the second coming, isn't that good news for the whole system? Tell me about 70 AD. Was that good news? Horrible. It's like, okay, I'm seeing this couple now driving to their wedding, and boom, they get killed on the way. How cynical can you get? AD 70 was a disaster for Jerusalem. The real second coming is restoration, peace on earth, right? That's what Daniel was asking for. So it seems to me the whole system is wrong. As it turns out, 70 AD was not it. Forget that. Because the Great Tribulation did not result in the second coming in AD 70. Again, this is not irrelevant because you've got some of our Unitarian friends who don't understand this. They're all confused about this. So let's read a few more verses of Matthew 24 and see what you think. Yes, Tom was saying something? No, my mistake. Okay, 24. They're asking about this question. I think he answered it. He was a good rabbi, and he answered the question and gave a series of things. What was the first thing Jesus warned against right there? Don't be kidding, deceived, right? The Bible is full of this. For goodness sake, don't be deceived. Be studying, be thinking, be praying. Oh God, give me the truth at all costs, as the Bible did. Right? Because there's every chance I'm going to get this wrong. Just being human is enough to get it wrong. So he said, don't let anybody kid you. Many will come. Doesn't he say that? Something like that? Many will come in my name as Christians, posing as Christians, and saying I'm the Christ. That probably doesn't mean they're saying I am the Messiah. Probably doesn't mean that. Very few people have done that. It's possible. More likely, they are saying I represent the Christ. And they're going to deceive many. So before you march into a Trinitarian church where the pastor doesn't understand who God is, at least give it some thought. I'll put it in my British understatement, right?
This is his first instruction.
First instruction, isn't that it? So he's telling us then you're in a world where deception is potentially very strong, is that right?
When you talk to these people, see, in various churches, I don't want names.
Yeah.
It's so difficult for them to believe that when you tell them your minister's not quite telling you right, because they trust him so much.
I know.
And this is the barrier you have to get past.
Absolutely right.
You have to put some doubt in their mind, and maybe he's not telling you the truth.
So
And that's
right.
difficult.
Yeah, as
Because-
Barbara said, the Baptist strong.
Because, as you said, they're good people.
They are, quote, good people. And look at what they do.
So how do you tell someone's lying
Very
to
hard.
you, and you've been,
Yeah.
you know,
You
he's
mean my
used for
doctor's
it.
killing me? Ooh, wait a minute. He's got a white coat. Look at the degrees. But their own doctors are saying, don't take this or that. How come the doctor is on television saying chemotherapy? No, there are better ways of doing it. I would never take it. 75% of doctors say I would never take chemotherapy. They could all be wrong. Maybe it's wonderful and it does help people.
You know, I keep hearing they're good people.
Well, good in the sense of not.
Yeah.
We know no one's
Yeah.
good. Okay. But
Yeah.
No, I know how you mean good.
Yeah.
And I was reading Matthew 5, and
Yeah.
I found this paraphrase. If you love only doesn't love you, what are you doing more than others?
Yes.
Even people who don't believe in God
Of course.
do that.
It's
So
powerful.
yes, there's a level, that's our what we call humanity, right?
Mm.
There's a level of morality, there's a level of ethics and love and goodness
Of course.
in people, but that verse to me really spoke
It's
out,
powerful.
right? Because it's
Yeah.
so tough on us
Mm.
Christians,
Yeah.
because Jesus is asking for that higher level
Yeah.
of love,
Absolutely.
and I would understand that as love your enemy,
Even that.
etc. So
Very tough.
Well,
Very
Matthew 5, 6,
Yep.
and 7, this has always been my favorite part.
5,
because
6,
it's the
and
most
7.
difficult
6 and 7.
oh,
part
6.
to live by.
And now we're giving you Matthew 24 and 25, Luke 21 and Mark 13. 5 chapters. People say, oh, I don't do prophecy. Let me quote Luther, who says, the book of Revelation is not a Christian book. Jesus has not taught that, period. Now, later on, towards the end of his life, he gave some credit to the book of Revelation. What? I thought that was 22 chapters of Jesus. Luther said it's not a Christian book. Christ is not, quote, he is not taught in the book of Revelation, period. Forget it. Don't read it. Calvin, who wrote a commentary on every book of the Bible, wrote no commentary on Revelation. I think that's absolutely astonishing. So we're trying to do something to recover that. Okay, moving right on then, you'll be hearing of wars and rumours of wars. Civil war is suggested there. We've had plenty of that, so this isn't quite specific, is it? Civil wars, verse 6? Okay, but what about the end of that sentence? Look at this. Rumours of wars. Don't be frightened. Don't be scared by that. Don't be frightened. For these things must take place. That's the Greek expression meaning in God's plan it has to happen, right? Like I must preach the gospel of the kingdom. That's what I'm driven to do, like a sheepdog has to round up a sheep. And then what does he say at the end? What's the end of that phrase in verse 6, the end of the sentence? The end...
These things must take place, but that is not yet the end.
Let's argue about that. Let's not. What end are we talking about? The end of the age, the end of the age. We're talking about 70 AD. No. Not at all. The end is not yet. Tell us about the end of the age. One of the tricks that we do with language is to change the meaning of words in mid-sentence, right? This is how you deceive people. You mean X by something and then you change it to Y in the same sentence. We call that equivocation. I do not think that Jesus equivocated. He's just been asked the question, what will be the end of your, the end of the age of the second coming? He says, so and so and so and so, but this is not yet the end. The parallel version says the end is not immediately. So let's argue about immediately. I mean, 1 second more. My point to you here is watch out for ourselves. Our human minds are very wicked. This is an Armstrong text, right? We can twist our way out of every possible thing. Okay, so the end is not yet. I get it. There's more to come. What else? 4. Nation will rise against nation. Kingdom against kingdom. Well, we've certainly seen that in the last century, have we not? Major. Whatever that is. It could be World War still. I don't know. It's not specific, but he's going to get specific very shortly. All these things are merely the Chavle HaMashiach. This is a very Jewish expression. How do we know that? Because we can read all the Jewish literature from the rabbis. This means the birth pangs of the days of Messiah. In other words, this world is going to be convulsed before it bears a child, which is the new world, right? Then you have to explain to your friends that when Christ comes back, it's the new birth, right? When the world is reborn. Paligenesia, Matthew 19:28, all of that good stuff, which people don't understand well. So these are the birth pangs, the agonies prior to the days of Messiah, not 70 AD. You see how cynical that is? 70 AD is nothing remotely to do with the birth of the world. It was worse. And incidentally, they burned the temple there by fire. Titus was not the guy mentioned in Scripture. Titus died 18 years later. Titus did. 18 years later, died naturally. The man of sin is going to be killed by Jesus at his second coming. That's a very critical point.
It's a big deal.
Big deal. Okay, so this is the beginning of sorrows. The Chavle HaMashiach. We have Jewish listeners, they'll know about that. Then they will deliver you up to tribulation. Not about the Great Tribulation yet. So have any of you suffered in your life? Have you had children who've opposed you? Have you had relatives who've opposed you? Deliver you up to tribulation. Same word, thlipsis, tribulation. And they're going to kill you. Well, that's a nice thing to tell me. Jesus, thank you. Wonderful sermon. I love it. Kill you? Yes. Are you ready to die for the faith? Hebrews says, you haven't shed blood yet. Come on. Where are you? You haven't shed blood. They are going to kill you. And judging by what I see on email, and I'm watching this day by day, the hatred is furious. Anthony, your narrow hips are going to burn in hell forever because you're chanting the Trinity. That's only mild compared to some. They hate this truth with a passion.
Anthony, just to go back, the birth pangs is very
powerful.
All throughout the prophets, Isaiah, Zechariah, so on, because before birth, the woman is in labor, and you got texts like Isaiah 26.
Yes.
And that's very important because if you're a 70 AD person, you only had the birth pangs.
Yes.
The birth pangs, but you didn't have the actual birth.
Isn't that cynical?
The child.
Isn't that cynical?
So it's like mid-labor.
Right.
Sort of.
And no birth, no restoration.
But it's all about, the prophets speak about that because it's a deliverance, correct? And Israel is like the child.
That's a good word.
Son of God.
The mother delivers the baby. There you go. That's great. That's a good word. Deliverance, right? 70 AD is cynical, right? The devil's saying, look, 70 AD, that's the second coming. What? They burned the temple, and did Jesus come back and restore Israel? Of course not.
Okay, can I just share a quick one? Micah 4 for this
Yes.
example. Now, why do you cry? Is there no king in you? Has your counsel perished? That pain sees you like a woman in labor?
Yes.
And then it goes on to describe the birth pain there. Micah 4.
Yes.
And then it goes to the now many nations are assembled against you.
Yes.
So that's put in parallel the birth pangs to the nations.
Yes. Hammering
the
Israel,
saints.
of course.
So I mean, it's great.
It's great.
I mean, great.
It's the same
It's bad,
bad, but it's over and over again. You were in Isaiah 26 there, were you not?
Yeah, Isaiah 26.
What about the 19th verse there? What does that say? Or 29 maybe it is. Maybe 29. Resurrection.
Yep. Isaiah
Just read that resurrection verse while we're at it in Isaiah 26. What is that?
26
Yeah.
says...
Am I in the wrong chapter?
No. Is it
Um,
verse 19?
19 or 29? Try one.
let's see. 19 says, "Your dead shall live, their
okay.
bodies shall rise. You who dwell in the dust, awake and sing for joy. For your dew is a dew of light,
Yes.
and the earth will give birth to the dead."
Wonderful.
So this is the end product of the tribulation, the birth pangs.
Yes.
But again, if you're a 70 AD person, think about that, because
Well,
you
that's
did
right.
not, you were not delivered.
Or you have birth pangs that go on for 2,000 years.
Maybe,
2000.
maybe
Yeah, like
falsely.
Anthony said.
Falsely.
Oh, false. There you go.
Falsely.
Yeah, like Anthony says, the Great Tribulation is ongoing, right?
Well, that's why, I keep telling you, we go to Olive Garden from you folks, and I say it in a loud voice because of people listening. This is not the Great Tribulation. Right now, this is not the Great Tribulation. It might be for people in Florida, almost, but it isn't the Great Tribulation.
So the point is, it's very important to connect the two teaching, the
Yeah.
two pictures of the birth pangs,
Absolutely.
because you don't want to remain in that state. And women know this.
No. And Daniel asked about that. We haven't even had time to do Daniel 9, the famous
That's the whole
prophecy.
point.
He's saying, oh God, look at the city and the sanctuary, look at the wreckage. Oh, he's breaking his heart. And the answer would be, it's all going to be okay in 70 AD. What? They burned the place down. No. It's just wrong. That prophecy refers to the second coming, the parousia, the anastasis. There's your Greek word for resurrection. Anastasis. Standing up again, right? Here you are prone, stand up again. That's anastasis, which is resurrection. None of this is hard until you get to listening to some of these people, and then you've got Unitarian friends of ours preaching this wrong. And I'm just agonized. Oh my goodness, what am I going to do? This is awful. Okay, back to the text then. What does he say? At that time, many will fall away. 9 says they'll deliver you to tribulation, not the Great Tribulation yet. They'll hand you over to tribulation. And false prophets will, many fake preachers, many fake preachers, liars from the pulpit, people with dark collars on will be lying to you massively and mislead many. Because lawlessness is increased, like you can kill babies in wombs, you can have free sex outside of marriage, etc. All of that is widespread. Then most people's love is going to get tepid. Is that right? There's no more love anymore. But the one who endures to the end. Now here I grant, the end I think means persist to the end of his life or the second coming, right? We don't have to insist on the parousia for that end. It's slightly different. But you've got to endure to the end of your life, at least, till the second coming, whatever. Will be saved. This gospel of the kingdom, isn't that marvelous? He didn't tell you this gospel. Challenge your pastors, your friends everywhere. Why is the phrase gospel of the kingdom never used in your evangelical church? That could suggest that Jesus has not been heard. If you misunderstand the basic terms like USA, you think it's the United Stamp Association, you're in a fog. You've got to define your terms. We did it with parousia. We did it with rapture. Catching up to meet the Lord post-tribulation. Got it. This is this gospel about the kingdom. I think because God is so agonized by the world, isn't he looking forward to the kingdom? And you are. Peace on earth, goodwill among men everywhere. And it'll get to work. No H-bombs. No A-bombs even. Okay, the one who does the end, that's it, 14. This gospel, this evangelion about the Vasilia, the kingdom of God is everything for Jesus. He's obsessed with the kingdom. Isn't he? God is. Jesus is. Must be preached, heralded, the word is to get a trumpet and blast it as loud as you can. You all listen, it's a town crier word, right? Listen, please, I'm here, tell me, listen to me. We have to do what Americans do so well in advertising. Have you seen how people say on the television, I'm here, take this drug and you'll be wonderful, take this or that, eat this, and you ain't seen nothing yet. Are you going to be, it's all smiles and pretty women, and life is great because I'm selling you a drug, or whatever it is I'm doing. We as Christians have to be saying, I'm here, I'm ready, I'm here, listen to me, I got something to say. Go viral. Go viral.
Amplified Bible has this good news of the kingdom, the gospel, will be preached throughout the whole world as a testimony to all the nations,
Yes.
and then the end of the age will come. Again, if you go to the prophets, as we should, because we're doing the prophecy here, Isaiah, Micah, Zechariah.
Wow.
Again, the parallel here with the end. So the kingdom coincides with, so one defines the other.
Of course.
Right?
The end is the
So
kingdom.
if you're 70 AD, once again,
Don't work.
think about it. Because was the kingdom established? Then they go to and ask in Acts 1:7,
Yes.
when will you restore
The kingdom, that's
to
the
Israel?
question.
So did that happen in 70 AD?
Obviously not. The very opposite. They burned the kingdom down. Jerusalem was destroyed.
But it's interesting, that verse is key because
Yeah.
the end is parallel to the kingdom.
Of course. And both are the parousia and the resurrection. Got it. Okay, we're not going to get through this. It's 5 to 12. Please note that the NIV says this gospel, probably gospel is right there. Otherwise they have Jesus. The NIV, tricky. They have Jesus preaching the good news and Paul preaching the gospel. I want you to see the crime scene here. There is a deliberate attempt to deceive you in translations. No, it's the same gospel. That's amazing.
With regards to what you're talking about now, with the gospel of the kingdom and the gospel of heaven would be one and the same.
Gospel of the kingdom of heaven is the same as the kingdom of God, of
Right.
course, yes.
But this is where the confusion is. See, they say, well, the gospel is, the kingdom is already established.
Yeah.
And God is ruling over his kingdom right now.
Really
I know
hard.
what some of that teaching is. I've been there.
Of course you.
So it's like, so if I say gospel, gospel of the kingdom, it's already established.
I know.
It's
good Catholicism.
You've got heaven, then you automatically read into
Of course
it.
you
I go to heaven,
Of course.
and that's where it will be.
That's right.
I mean, I know this era. I've been taught it all my life. The first
Good
part of
Southern
my
Baptist
life,
boy.
I was taught all that stuff. I didn't really listen, but I just picked it up by being there.
Exactly.
So the
Solved it.
So you're saying the kingdom was established, they're saying the kingdom
Well,
has been
because they
established in
confuse
heaven?
heaven and the kingdom, of heaven, the kingdom of God. They say, well, it's two different things. See,
Right.
God is actually ruling over it right now. His kingdom he's actually ruling from
So
heaven.
the kingdom's here, but it's also in heaven.
Yeah, right. Because, and so you go to heaven when you die, and you'll be in it. See,
Or
then
they'll say that it's in your heart.
it's in your heart.
Sure.
It's their major text, Luke 7.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, but it's
all
interesting though about,
mishmash of just
A mishmash is right.
right.
it's interesting the idea of it's here somehow, but also,
Yeah, it's right.
so why are you going to heaven if it's here?
Okay. We're not going to get through all this today, obviously, but we do get to verse 15. Therefore, when you see, now this is most important, connection between 14 and 15. 14 says, this gospel of the kingdom will be heralded in the whole wide world, the whole economy, as a testimony, a witness. God speaking, right? You all listen, I'm God, he's saying, God is saying, he's God, my kingdom is coming, you better listen and obey and repent. So this gospel of the kingdom, we preach, I get it. And then, though, the end will come. Well, you remember in verse 9, the end was not immediately, right? Are we changing the meaning of the word end? Obviously not. Only one end here. The end now will come. When you therefore see, do you see the connection? You could translate it, therefore when you see, Consequently, when you see, connected to the end, then the end will come. That's what I mean when I say the following. Got it? They will try to pull that connection apart and destroy the narrative. We're trying to give you false, they're trying to give you false narrative. No, therefore, that's to say, in view of what I've just said about the end coming, therefore, when you see, now they're long dead, these people, but I don't think Jesus knew when this was going to happen. When you see the A of D, now that's critical. The A of D is 4 times in Daniel. Daniel 11:31, Daniel 8:13, Daniel 12:11, and what's the last one here? 11:31. 11:31. 9:27.
Yep.
AFD. And then Daniel 12:11. If you have people who believe in the day-year theory, all the days are turned into years. That's mass confusion. Let's say all the dimes are really $50. Just absolute, total, and absolute confusion. But if their guru teacher taught them it, it's very hard to change. So you do Daniel 12:11. From the time that the daily sacrifice is taken away and the abomination is set up, there'll be 1290 days to the end of the vision, which is the resurrection. Which is the resurrection. All right, so 1290 years before the resurrection.
That's when you start counting, right?
Yes, 1290 years before the resurrection. You could have predicted the second coming 1290 years on that theory.
But
it's
we
false.
haven't seen the abomination yet.
No, but they would say it's future, but you could have calculated it 1290 years before. This is one of the points you can do with some of our friends, right? On Facebook. Wait a minute, so the days are years, so Daniel 12:11, explain that. And they'll go weak at the knees trying to explain it. There are key verses which will change our mind. Oh, we had to change our minds. We were told by the Christian, we had to change our minds. Wait a minute, you've got 2 gods, Andrew. Wait a minute. The rock that followed them was Jesus. Come on now. In God's mercy, we were so beaten down by the Armstrong experience, I think, we were listening. Most of your friends are not listening. You know that. But some are. And then you change their minds. Okay. Finishing off very quickly here.
And you do believe that it's a man, not a bunch of men. I mean, one man.
Single, absolutely. Why? Because the man of sin is also used of Judas. He's called the man of sin as well. Man of iniquity, what is it? The lawless man, the man of lawlessness.
Son of perdition.
Yes. Judas is that. There's no reason why man of sin should be a collective thing.
King of the North.
King of the North is a single person.
You cannot be.
The beast is a single person. He's the 11th with a 10 and an 11th one. Man of sin is not a collectivity, I think. Not a series of popes. That doesn't work well.
One dude.
All right, we're just about through. So here we go with 17. If you're on the housetop, don't get your clothes. This sounds like a certain amount of urgency, doesn't it? It's exactly parallel to the evacuation order, isn't it? Get out of there quick. Don't go back in your house. Amazing. This is Christianity we're doing today, a part of it. Then if you're in Judea, head for the hills. Actually, they didn't flee to the mountains in 70 AD. They fled to Pella, which isn't exactly there. So, as Tom's point earlier, about the stones that still remain, there's some doubt about any of that even fitting. Anyway, those who are pregnant, tough. Now, here's a strong question to your historicist friends. How long is the Great Tribulation? They say, well, it began in 70 AD, so it's been going on till immediately after the second coming. That's an awful long Great Tribulation, nearly 2,000 years. What did Jesus say here? It's tough for pregnant women. Come on now. They're facing a very great crisis. The historicist has got this beloved guru who's taught them this, and you say, wait a minute, you think the Great Tribulation is 2,000 years? It's tough for pregnant women? That's absurd.
You might want to
go easy.
It is tough for pregnant women.
Yeah.
Always, regardless of.
Of course.
Right. We're not saying it's not tough.
Jesus is saying that the Great Tribulation is tough for pregnant women. We
I thought
understand.
I was in the tribulation. Right?
Yeah. It's not. It wasn't the Great Tribulation.
The Great Tribulation.
That's why I go to Olive Garden. This is not the Great Tribulation.
A few pregnancies.
Yeah. If you could win one of our historicist friends to our correct point of view, you bless them with sanity. Words of Jesus.
Gotta wrap it up.
We've got to wrap it up. Okay, so these are terribly difficult times, but pray that your flight be not in the winter, which is more difficult, or on the Sabbath day, because they close the gates in Jerusalem. Only Matthew mentions the Sabbath day because of particular interest to Jewish audiences. So it's tough on Saturday. Pray that you wouldn't have to get out of there on a Saturday or when winter makes it more difficult. I get it. It's very practical. For them. Let's argue about the word then. Let's not. 21, right? For them. Dote in Greek. T-O-T-E. Dote. Then. At that time. At that time. Not immediately. Well, it doesn't say immediately there. It doesn't say thousands of years later, but just then. There will be, here it is, a great tribulation. We started our talk this morning by pointing out that Jesus mentioned this in Revelation 7:14. There will be a great tribulation, such as has never been, ever. Never occurred since the beginning of the world until now, meaning until that time. Right? That's a Hebraic way of speaking now. Till now in the vision, right? You understood that easily. Until that time. And then what happens? And never, ever will be again. Unless those days had been cut short by God in His mercy, nobody would survive.
So that's bad tribulation.
Very bad tribulation.
That's bad.
All tribulation is bad.
Yeah, but that's
But this is the
murders,
great tribulation.
mass murder, mass
Well, chaos.
torturing.
Terrible, yes. Somebody's going to attack Israel like crazy from the north. Who knows how this affects the rest of the world? I don't know that. It doesn't expressly say. But anyway, the days are bad. And then in 23, then, dote, at that time. If anybody says to you, oh, watch the deception, behold, the Messiah's here, there he is. Do you realize that Jesus said, don't believe certain things. Do not believe. So the devil's going to play a trick on them. Oh, come on here in the wilderness, he's over here. Let's go over here. Remember when they say, here he is, there he is. Don't believe a word of it. We can do more with Luke 17. Probably he means the kingdom of God when it comes will be visible all over, not local. So don't believe them. Don't rush off and look in the wilderness and so on. Okay. Do not believe them. I like that. I don't like it, but it's striking. Do not believe them. Because false messiahs, false clergy, false preachers will arise and will show great signs. My goodness, what lengths will the devil go to achieve his aims here? Signs and wonders. In order to what? Mislead. Incredible stuff. If that were possible, even the chosen few, they shouldn't be deceived, but even they are going to be deceived. Some of our Unitarian people have been terribly deceived here. They're preaching about how the second coming, or not the second, but the Great Tribulation happened in 70 AD. It's just wrong. And then 25, we can finish with this. Behold, I have told you in advance. About 70 AD? I don't think so. You see how you can collapse this whole thing by saying this is mainly and chiefly about 70 AD? It's not. It's about the end of the age. Okay, so I've told you in advance. I love that. And yet we're going to see when we finish this next week, we'll have to complete it now. He's going to say, I don't know when it is. I don't know when it is. But I've told you in advance the signs of it. That's an important distinction. He, Jesus, didn't know the day or the hour. But he jolly well knew from Daniel the signs. Isn't that clear? Okay. Good. Are we going to sing a song to complete, Sarah, or what do you think?
Yeah.
So we went up through 27.
Let's start next week, if we can, in verse 26. So if they say to you,
Okay.
more warnings, and then description of the parousia in 27, you have to admit, you learn some brand new things somewhere along the line today. It's not old stuff entirely. And don't forget, down the line, people are listening to these YouTube things, and so we're working with them in mind as well.